أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على السلام حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ. یہ سارے نمازی بھی کرسیوں پہ بیٹھے ہیں جن کو کوئی
Those who are sitting on chairs, if they do not have any factors which make them sit on chairs, they should instead sit on the prayer mat. If they are listening to the jalsa, then they can sit on the chairs. However, for the sake of their Friday prayers, they should sit on the prayer mat. You have made yourselves too comfortable by sitting on the chair. Those who have to and have reasons to should remain sitting on the chair.
وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن
الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
آج انشاءاللہ
Today, inshallah, God willing, the Jalsa Salana, the annual convention of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, Great Britain, will begin. First of all, I would like to say that during these days of the Jalsa Salana, from every single perspective, to make it blessed in every way, lay special stress upon prayers. May Allah the Almighty, during these days, enable for a sincere environment to remain intact. And may the attendees of Jalsa be increased in their levels of piety and righteousness and the fear of Allah, the taqwa. Nowadays, a pandemic is rife, as a result of which here the attendance numbers is actually quite limited. However, those in their homes, and I have been informed in some other places, the Jamaat, the Ahmadiyya community, has made arrangements where people will congregate to attend the Jalsa, for example, in mosques or wherever halls are available to us. However people will participate in the Jalsa in whatever form, they should also participate with this mentality and this approach in mind, as if they are sitting in the Jalsa Gar themselves. And for all 3 days, they should listen to the Jalsa proceedings and spend their time in supplication and prayers. For the Jalsa Salana to be held in the year that we are going through is actually a brand new experience for the organizers. It is also a brand new experience for the participants of the Jalsa. In terms of the organizers, there are certain facilities which they normally provide for the comfort of the Jalsa guests are not all available and were not all available to provide this year, because they thought that they would be able to provide those facilities, but they were unable to acquire them. Therefore, the guests and the participants of the Jalsa Salana should understand these limitations that we are facing. And wherever they find shortcomings in the arrangements, should try to ignore them and overlook them. They should pray that may Allah the Almighty rapidly improve the circumstances we are going through, to enable us to then hold Jalsa's annual conventions with the same glory that they used to be held. Some people have a complaint that as a result of certain conditions, they were not able to participate in the Jalsa and attend. Or some people say that the selection of the attendees of the Jalsa was not adequate or correct. In any case, the organizers in this regard does present its justifications. Some local chapters of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community also present the justification that whether right or wrong, whether the justification is right or wrong, irrespective of whether it is right or wrong, I will say to the members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community to also overlook any shortcomings. And remember that this is a first experience, and therefore when something is experienced for the first time, errors can creep through, and therefore forgive. Do not hold any type of grief or anguish or rancor. After this, I will speak about the Jalsa Salana and hospitality. Generally, on the day of the Jalsa, in the sermon, I normally draw the attention of the guests or the organizers to certain matters with relation to the arrangements. And the Friday sermon 1 week before the Jalsa Salana, I speak with regards to those who are doing duty, who are providing the hospitality and their responsibilities and obligations. However, because I did not say anything in the previous sermon with relation to the duty holders, therefore today I will combine and speak to both those who are giving hospitality and those who are receiving hospitality. First of all, I would like to say to the organizers, to the hosts, to the duty workers, that because of the prevailing circumstances, there should not, despite this, be any shortcoming in your extension of hospitality. This time there are 6,000 or 7,000 guests, or there are 6,000 or 7,000 guests who normally come from foreign countries who will not come this Jalsa or annual convention. There will be guests who will arrive from within the nation or the country. And even these are in quite limited numbers. Therefore, considering this to be do not consider this to be an easier task and become complacent and relaxed. If any shortcomings do arise, then the people who you know better actually will complain to a greater degree. So therefore, with great prudence, with great care and concern and attention, ensure that you extend hospitality to each and every guest. Do not allow there to be any shortcoming which arises. With the grace of the Almighty Allah, in terms of the Jalsa Salana of Great Britain, the annual convention of the Ahmadiyya community in Great Britain, and in terms of the hospitality, as I also spoke yesterday in the inspection address which I gave to the workers and their responsibilities, I also said then that workers of every denomination and of every department, whether it's from Nasrat, the young girls, the Lajna, the women, the Khudam, the men over 15 to 40, the Ansar who are over 40, whoever they may be, whatever work they carry out, they have become experts in their respective tasks. They now hold the capacity to cater for very large-scale tasks. They are also able to teach and train the boys and girls who are entering into the age. So therefore, there is no concern in this regard whether the work is known and the skill is present and capacity to carry out the work. Because in every department of Jalsa Salana, the annual convention, there are workers who can work in great depth within their fields and respective departments and have the capacity and capability to do so. But however, because it is the command of Allah the Almighty that a mu'min, a true believer, should be kept reminded on. A mu'min needs to be reminded, a true believer should be reminded, because this is beneficial for him or her. As I have said, this time the Jalsa is on a much smaller scale. The Jalsa Salana is being done on a much smaller scale, and perhaps people come into the misapprehension that because it is on a smaller scale, we don't need to give as much attention. And when this is the way of thinking, this creates problems and shortcomings. Those who are doing duty for the first time may ascertain a wrong impression and message from this approach. So therefore, for the comfort of the guests, And also for those who are entering into the age where they are carrying out duties for the first time, it is essential and crucial that even if the Jalsa Salana is not being held on such a large scale as normal, it is still vital, it is so significant that every task that you carry out is done properly in every department. Especially because we are facing quite adverse weather conditions nowadays, so therefore certain departments must give special emphasis towards these matters. Every duty holder should bear this in mind, that whether the guests are arriving in large or small numbers, the guests who arrive at Jalsa Salana are nonetheless guests of the promised Messiah, peace be upon him. Thus, to the maximum degree possible, as much as we possibly can, we must fulfill their right. Hospitality is such a quality which the prophets themselves and even the communities and people of the prophets demonstrate a distinctive feature within this trait. It is a hallmark of divine communities. So in terms of being a religious community, it behoves us that all of us should reflect this distinctive quality of hospitality within each and every single one of us. It should reflect amongst all of us, and we should all display it prominently. During the period of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, when a large number of guests started to arrive, the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, would distribute the guests amongst the Sahaba, the companions. The companions would rejoice at being offered the opportunity to take back the guests. When in the morning the Holy Prophet would ask the guests about how their night went, and about the companions' hospitality extended to them and the service of hospitality that they received, each and every guest would unanimously explain that we had never seen such people who extend this level of hospitality, who demonstrate the right of extending hospitality. So therefore, this is that perfect example which emanated out of that blessed model of the Holy Prophet, and then the companions left behind and established for us. In the modern age, we have accepted the promised Messiah, peace be upon him. And the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, also has inculcated us to tread upon this very path. The same path which was established by the Sahaba, the companions. On one occasion, the promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wassalam, on whom be peace, admonishing the members of his community, said, in terms of my principle, if any guests arrive and we reach to this level where the guests even use harsh terms against you or have a very difficult demeanor, even then you should tolerate this. Albeit the promised Messiah here was referring to external guests, but nonetheless we should bear in mind that whoever the guest may be, even if it is an Ahmadi guest, still it applies that it is the responsibility of a host to always extend the best treatment to the guests. You should never respond to harshness with harshness, whether it is an Ahmadi or a non-Ahmadi. The fact is, the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, we find extraordinary examples of the hospitality in his life. The promised Messiah also, extending hospitality towards Ahmadis, displayed exemplary examples. And of course, this will certainly be the case, because it is in this age, it is the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, who demonstrated those highest morals, which was going to illuminate that beautiful image of Islam to the world and to us. Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, may Allah be pleased with him, relates that once I came from Lahore to Qadian. The promised Messiah, peace be upon him, had me seated in the Mosque of Mubarak. At the time, it was a very small place. It was only a very small mosque the size of a room. The promised Messiah said, "Please be seated. I shall arrange and bring food for you." Saying this, the promised Messiah went into his home. Hazrat Mufti Sahib then explains, "I thought that perhaps the promised Messiah would send the food at the hand of one of his house workers or servants. But a few minutes later, when the door opened, what do I see? I see that the promised Messiah, with his own hand, is bringing the food in a tray and delivering it personally for me. Seeing me, the promised Messiah said, 'Now please kindly eat food and let me bring water for you.' Mufti Sahib says, spontaneously, I started crying uncontrollably. And I thought, when the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, the chosen one, is actually doing this service for us, then imagine us. To what degree should we serve one another? On one occasion, there was a shortcoming of the number of beds available. The promised Messiah, peace be upon him, then gave his own bed up to guests. In fact, he gave all the beds of his home, and he spent the entire night without a bed, in difficulty. However, he did not let anyone realize or feel that he was facing any difficulty. This is the true sacrifice for guests. Sometimes people do carry out sacrifices. However, they recount their sacrifices to others, and they say that, look how much difficulty we had to endure because of the sacrifice we made. On one occasion, the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, said, "It has always been my way of thinking that I should not let any difficulty reach to any guest. In fact, I always continue to admonish that to the extent possible, I should always give comfort to the guests. The heart of a guest is very delicate. And through a little bit of pain, that heart can be broken." So he says that previously I had made arrangements to eat with my guests so that I could directly perceive the level of hospitality being extended, whether every guest has been given their food and so on, so he could see all the arrangements. The promised Messiah says that because of my illness, since I had to have a particular diet, I could not carry on with this arrangement. And there was another reason for this, that the number of guests who were arriving were to such a degree that there was not enough space. It became very difficult for everyone to sit together and eat. Guests would be served food in different places or in turn. So therefore, by force or due to these compelling factors, we had to separate. Then once he said to the Langar Khana in charge of the communal kitchen, when many guests were coming in large numbers, he said, "Look, how many guests are coming and in such large numbers? Some you recognize and others you do not. So therefore, it is appropriate that you should serve everyone without discrimination and equally. So therefore, for the host, all guests are guests. Do not treat any individual with special treatment. It should not be that because such and such is an office holder or such and such person I know, so therefore I should serve that person more. Or I should treat a certain individual for certain reasons in a better case. Rather, consider all guests as equal guests and give them equal treatment." You should extend respect and reverence to every single guest. This is the root of true hospitality. the promised Messiah says that you think well of me, or you think well that you extend hospitality to guests. So you should think well of all guests and actually serve them properly. This is that positive thinking which every server or host should develop. With the grace of the Almighty Allah, the vast majority do have this positive thinking towards others and do fulfill this right. And those amongst the people who do not live up to this positive thinking approach should gauge that how can they overcome this shortcoming that they possess. And by overcoming this shortcoming, they should then elevate their level of hospitality. I am aware that the workers of certain departments do face difficulty by the attitude of certain guests. But despite this, it is our duty that we should never let go of the route of treating guests well. Whatever the guest may express, they may express. Regardless, every duty worker must make it obligatory upon them that they must at all times display the highest moral standards. Perhaps on this occasion, due to the small numbers in attendance, some duty workers will not face the normal challenges that they normally face, or certain duty workers may think that they will not have to face those challenges. However, when duty workers have to express certain restrictions and guidelines to the guests and remind them about it, it is quite feasible, it is quite possible that certain guests will display a negative reaction. For example, to remind people to constantly wear masks. Organizers will remind guests of this, or to continuously socially distance, because normally people don't adhere to social distancing properly, and you will keep on reminding people. There are certain restrictions that have to be reminded with relation to food. Despite reminding people, if anyone responds to you in a harsh manner and does not listen, then you must absorb that harshness and respond with kindness. Generally speaking, the guests do understand that they have to adhere to certain guidelines by way of restrictions. However, there are some people who inherently, and it is within their nature, to show negative reactions quite hastily. There are just a minority of these people, but they do exist. Now, if duty workers respond to people of this manner, also in a harsh way, this will spiral into a further negative circumstance, which can create problems. So therefore, when you are explaining these things to people and you want to request them to adhere, and you want to express to them certain things, you must do so with great patience, great tolerance, and great kindness. The Holy Prophet said that one of the hallmarks of a mu'min, of a believer, is that they revere and respect guests. It is a hallmark of a believer that they respect guests. So therefore, this quality that is the hallmark of a believer must be displayed in every single person. As a result of rainfall, in the parking in Hadikatul Mahdi, there is limited parking in Hadikatul Mahdi due to the rain. Although there is plenty of space, it is muddy. As a result, there is danger of the cars slipping or getting stuck. So we have obtained another car park where there will be a shuttle service where people will be brought here by bus. Over here, those giving duties with great patience, with great love and kindness, would have to explain to the car workers or to those coming in cars. There are some people who force their way in. They say, we have come here and we must go through, so you must explain to them in a very gentle manner. The guests should understand and cooperate with the hosts and the organizers. It is only through this mutual cooperation, through working together, that we can create the proper environment of success. And we can create efficiency in our tasks. So therefore, there must be cooperation from both sides. The guests should not only hold expectations from the host that they should listen to every single thing we say and act upon it. In fact, it is also the duty of the guests that they should also adhere and follow the guidelines that have been created. It's only then that all the work can be carried out in a streamlined manner. Guests need to also take into account the following at all times. That where in Islam hosts have been instructed to always respect and revere guests, there Islam also draws the attention of guests as well. And Islam says that in the capacity of a guest, you also have certain responsibilities. Islam has told us clearly and elucidated to us that as a guest, when you go to visit somebody, then you should also consider the engagements of the host and what their schedule. You should inform them beforehand. On the one hand, the hosts have been admonished that you should always treat any guest who comes to your home in a kind manner, whatever time the guest may arrive. On the other side, it is the guests who have been reminded that when you visit the home of any person, you should give them notice beforehand. If you go to someone's home without any notice, and the person of the home does not allow you into the home for a certain reason, then you should return to your home without any complaint. This does not normally apply to the guests of the Jalsa. However, this year, as I have already explained, due to these compelling and special circumstances, there is a duration limit that has been placed, or a limit in terms of age, that only people of between certain ages are allowed. And there are also other conditions relating to health included in the policy of attendance. Considering all of these, the overall guideline has been formed. The Jamaats, the chapters of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, based on this, have been informed to select people, those people who fulfill the criteria of the prerequisites. It is possible, as I had mentioned before, that in certain places that there was some shortcomings in the selection process. And perhaps complaints did arise from certain regions. Similarly, there are people who have come or have newly moved to this country and do not fulfill the criteria. However, they try to insist that regardless, we must be allowed to attend the Jalsa. Perhaps some who arrive from other countries will try to force their way through with one of the local relatives, or they try to insist to the local organizers that they must be given participation. Such people must keep in mind that by breaking the system in this way will only create problems. Allah the Almighty has given this guidance, which is a principle and is a foundational moral which Allah has given us and has instructed us, that do not enter someone's home without their permission. And if you are told to return, then you should return without any complaint. Allah the Almighty says, وَإِن قِيلَ لَكُمْ وَإِن قِيلَ لَكُمْ مُرْجِعُوا فَارْجِعُوا وَأَزْكَى لَهُمْ. And if you are told to return, then you should return. This is closer to piety for you. The Jalsa Salana, the annual convention, one of the biggest objectives of attending the Jalsa Salana is to bring about reformation and to purify yourselves. Instead of trying to force your way through to participate in the Jalsa, to adhere to the guidelines is actually closer to piety. Therefore, some people have even written to me to try and insist to attend, or some people are trying to insist to the organizers to be able to attend. They should adhere to the prerequisites instead. That is better. And this is nothing wrong as well. You should accept this. There should be no complaint offered in this regard. You should pray to Allah the Almighty. And in such circumstances which we are facing nowadays, a person will pray with even more yearning that may Allah the Almighty rapidly transform the circumstances so that people, according to their wishes, may freely attend the Jalsa Salanas, the annual conventions. The companions had an astonishing way of adhering to the commands of the Holy Quran. One Sahabi, a companion, says that for years, at different times, I started going to people's homes at different times without telling them, so that people could tell me that you cannot come into my home at this time, please return home, you cannot meet us at this time. So return to your home. So the companion explains, it was my wish that they should tell me to return and I should spontaneously go to their house without telling them, so they should be forced to say this so that I could receive the blessings of fulfilling this command of the Holy Quran. But he says it never happened that I went to someone's home and they apologized and said to return. So both the host and the guest, for the sake of Allah the Almighty, made their level best efforts to fulfill the commands of Allah. To develop these type of morals and with great enthusiasm to act upon the commands of the Holy Quran, I explained this aforementioned golden principle. However, there are a category of certain people who, to insist and to persist on their choice, will constantly keep trying to make an effort, and they do so that the organizers end up not refusing. Generally speaking, the organizers do not refuse such requests, and they should not. And if they do in normal circumstances, then they will not be fulfilling the right of guests, and will be contrary to this teaching of Islam which I have explained. It is that teaching which the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, has especially laid emphasis upon us to implement. He personally established examples for us, and so did the companions, that even the promised Messiah, even when guests arrived to him without notice, he always provided hospitality. But as I have also explained, this Jalsa is being held in special circumstances. We have compelling factors, and guests are being refused based on these mitigating circumstances, and therefore people should cooperate without complaint. Yet, at the same time, I would like to say to these people, those who have received invitations, that despite compelling circumstances, they should attend the Jalsa. Otherwise, by their not attending Jalsa Salana, they would be usurping the right of those who did not get permission to come. Do not make the adverse weather conditions an excuse. We speak about adverse weather conditions, then the participants of the Jalsa, if they use this as a justification, we should remember that in Rabwa, or Qadian, in the open fields, in the days of winter, the Jalsa Salanas, the annual conventions, were held or are held. Nowadays, in Rabwa, the Jalsa Salana has not been held for many years, but this is how they used to be held. The Jalsas, the annual conventions, when they would be held during the winter, even during the rain, the attendees would sit quietly and with some technique or the other, they would cover themselves from the rain. When in Islamabad, the Jalsa Salanas used to be held and rain used to descend, the marquee would sometimes flood, and there was grass that was placed sometimes underneath. There was sometimes not proper flooring, which now we find the proper flooring of wood, but there was actually grass underneath the carpet. I remember that once I attended the Jalsa and it rained, and as a result of the rain, even within the Jalsa Gah, water came into the Jalsa Gah itself, the marquee, and the whole floor became wet. There was water flooded on the corners. There were people who would offer their prayer standing up on the sides. And when they would be offering their prayer, their ankles would be filled with mud. Even I had to do this. When we got up from prostration, from the sajda, we had to clean our foreheads or our eyes so that mud does not come upon our face, or because grass would be upon us. Yet everyone at the time I observed and witnessed attended the Jalsa with a passion. With the grace of the Almighty Allah, this passion still exists. And I should say the vast majority of Ahmadis display this passion. However, there are people who are a little delicate in their nature, or because of certain situations, they have become a bit, they find it more difficult, and so such people who receive invitation should most certainly still come. If you have received an invitation, then people should try to come. Further, as I have explained before as well, there are some people who habitually always get into quarrels and arguments. They will definitely try to pick out every fault from the organizers and say, this is how it should have been, or they will present excuses for why they did not attend. Anyhow, they should consider these things. Today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, those who have received invitations or those who have received permissions to come, they should certainly come. I would like to say some matters with relation to the arrangements. In the food marquee, the organizers, when the food is being given and when the food is being eaten, they have given some guidelines in terms of social distancing. You should follow these guidelines. It has been written everywhere that keep a distance. However, despite these guidelines clearly being posted everywhere, they do not give attention nor read those guidelines or signs. In normal circumstances we observe, and also nowadays, they do not consider the distances that should be kept. So at the time of eating food, at the time of being given the food, you must especially consider that you must distance from one another. When you are eating food, naturally you would have to remove your mask. However, when you are in the line waiting to receive your food, you should be wearing your mask. Also, whoever is carrying out any duty must consider it an absolute obligation without exception that they must always wear their mask. If the workers show any relaxation in terms of wearing their masks, or they are slack in following the guidelines themselves, then this will have a knock-on effect upon the guests, and they will not adhere. So therefore, the duty workers and the guests must consider it obligatory to wear a mask. Whether it is a worker or a guest in the car park, in the toilets, or walking along the path in the Jalsagah, the main marquee, in the food marquee. Even in the Jalsagah, the main marquee, you should sit wearing your mask. Indeed, sometimes the organizers may ask you to remove your mask to identify yourselves, and for this you should cooperate with them. Also, if any nadis, any slogans are raised through the central organization, then you should remember that when you are replying to the slogan, then you should not remove your mask. Or if you are offering a slogan, do not remove your mask. Some people display carelessness in this regard. This is a completely new experience this time, so therefore you must be very vigilant and you must be very careful in this regard. This is necessary to protect yourselves and also to protect those around you. Your nose and your mouth must be covered. Then when you are entering the gate, they will be checking. Your AIMS card will be checked, and perhaps your vaccination status or your other permission cards or certain guidelines according to them, you'll be checked. So therefore you should cooperate fully with those checking you. Do not express anything which amounts to you displaying your grief at the checking. All these precautions are actually being carried out for the protection of all the attendees and for the safety of all the attendees. Because we are in small numbers, I would like to say another point, that do not relax in terms of security. In this regard, the duty workers and also those attending the Jalsa Salana, the annual convention, should observe complete vigilance in the same way that we did in the past. With relation to food, I would like to also add that in the afternoon, inshallah, God willing, the food will be given in the food marquee. And there you must adhere to the aforementioned guidelines. In the evening, the organizers plan to give you packs to take away to your homes. Now, they will try to distribute these as quickly as possible, but if there is any delay, do not get worried. With relation to listening to the Jalsa Salana proceedings, the same guidelines that in general I will repeat as every year, that listen to the Jalsa Salana. And as a result of meeting one another after a long period of time, as in you've met your friends or relatives, do not spend time in idle chit-chat in different parts of the Jalsa. Your main purpose is is to listen to the Jalsa. As a result of the pandemic, many people who are very close friends, and as a result of living in various cities, so your close friends and relatives you'll be meeting after a very long time, because there was no Jamaat functions during this period. So after meeting one another after a long period of time, do not make that an excuse to deprive yourselves from listening to the actual Jalsa. Or do not allow that to distract you from prayers and supplication. You have come to attend the Jalsa Salana, and therefore take avail of it to the maximum degree possible. Hazrat Muslih Maud, the second worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, during the days of the Jalsa Salana, drawing attention towards Zikr Ilahi, the remembrance of Allah, mentioned a certain aspect, a point. He said, I thought that Allah the Almighty has said that remember Allah during the days of Jalsa. That is, whenever you gather in an assembly, you should remember Allah. So he says, Allah the Almighty has explained the benefit, that Uzkurullaha yazkurukum. That if you carry out zikr ilahi, the remembrance of Allah, Allah will remember you. Now how fortunate or blessed is such an individual whose God remembers them. So therefore, zikr ilahi, the remembrance of Allah, is a means during these days to attract the blessings of Allah to a greater degree. So especially during these days, give emphasis towards zikr ilahi, the remembrance of Allah. Ahmadis, wherever you may be listening to the Jalsa worldwide, wherever you may be gathering, if you are gathering anywhere or gathering even with your families, you should also give attention towards zikr ilahi, the remembrance of Allah, so that we can, to the best degree possible, be able to attract Allah's bounties and graces. It is so we can improve our spiritual conditions. And so, we can attract the blessings of Allah and save ourselves from the catastrophes of the world. So therefore, derive full benefit from the atmosphere of this Jalsa. Listen to the educational addresses and also by supplicating and praying. On this occasion, due to the smaller numbers, there is arrangements for everyone to sit on chairs. So therefore there is no excuse of having to be seated for a long period of time. The Jalsa Salana proceedings are perhaps at the most 2.5 or 3 hours at the very most, the sessions of the Jalsa. It is not difficult to even sit on the floor considering this. At the end, I will present an extract of the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, where he says, all members, listen to this carefully. I to my Jamaat, my community, and to myself, and for myself, for my soul, desire and wish and prefer this, that the apparent, do not just rely on the apparent discourses and words and expressions and forget and consider that your ultimate objective is just on the majestic way that a person is delivering an eloquent speech. Do not focus on the words. I am not satisfied when people simply take delight from great oratory. I do not like pretentiousness. In fact, my nature begins with this fact, that whatever we carry out, it should be for the sake of Allah inherently. Whatever you do should be for the sake of God. Then he says, one of the greatest reasons that there was a decline amongst the Muslims is exactly this. Otherwise, they have huge amounts of conferences in the Muslim world. And in these conferences and gatherings and organizations, and they have people who deliver lectures and speeches, and they give addresses. And there are poets amongst them. But yet, what is the reason that that is not having any impact? Instead of progressing and successing daily, they are falling in decline. The reason for this is that the attendees of those gatherings, they do not come with the intention of sincerity or devotion. Another reason is that when you're listening to the speech, that I want to listen to a certain individual or person. No, you should listen to all the speeches. You should listen to all of the Jalsa and not select which speaker you prefer to listen to. And you should listen with devotion and sincerity. This sincerity and devotion will be derived when you have a passion to gain the pleasure of Allah. And when you develop this passion to gain the pleasure of Allah, it is then that we will cater for our spiritual reformation. It is then that we will cater for the spiritual reformation of our children and our future generations. It is for this that we must continuously struggle. May Allah the Almighty enable every single one of us who is attending this Jalsa Salana or is listening to this Jalsa Salana remotely, that they should develop this true sincerity and devotion within themselves. Also pray for the weather during these days. Let not this weather become an obstacle in any of our programs. Rather, may Allah the Almighty change it into our favor.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد.
हम जिनकी चाहत में गिनते थे दिन अपनी सीने जान के लिए, फिर वो चेहरे हवेदा हुए जिनकी यादें क़ियामत थी क़ल्बे तपा के लिए। आए वो दिन के हम जिनकी चाहत में गिनते थे दिन अपनी